Hi there, Dreamers. Well, it's taken a good while to get back to this. In the same vein as when we were doing the original Q&A, it's taken us, what, 2 months to get back to answering these questions. Thank you everybody for leaving your questions on the video. Let's get started. Crystal Creation asks, in the past you have shown that you work with synthesizers. Tell me a bit how you became exposed to them, what animated you to use them long term, and how they work. Well, this is possibly quite a big question. I could almost do a whole video just talking about synthesizers. How I became exposed to them, I started watching and listening to a lot of improvisational electronic music where DJ producer types were going up onto stage with a rack of all sorts of electronics and making music in real time. I found that not only quite interesting to listen to, but I was thinking, well, I'd love to learn how to do that because it looks like a lot of fun and I love the sound of it. So on a whim, I ended up just going out and buying a drum machine, which was terrible, and only a drum machine, which is pretty useless, really. But that got me on a bit of a spiral into getting more and more little hardware synthesizers to pair up with the drum machine, which is long gone now. I've replaced that and subsequently replaced its replacement as well. In terms of that, in terms of how they work, I have a mixer. I maybe put a picture of it on the screen here. All the different instruments feed into that, and then you sort of twiddle the knobs, program sequences into it, and you get some noises out of it. I think I've done some brief videos of some of these things on the channel, which maybe I'll share. It's a lot of fun, but I will confess that in 2021 so far, my drive to really do much with them has been pretty muted. I haven't really been feeling all that musically creative. And because I've not been doing weekly beats, I've not been having this kind of driver to keep me doing anything. So, yeah, that's a bit of a shame. But I'm hoping maybe with the right encouragement, I'll be able to get back into it in the latter half of the year. Zach Montminty asks, how do you feel that on a game as obscure, relatively, as Yumi Tooky, that you somehow carved out a 170 plus video series and have a few hundred people who stuck around and watched them consistently for over 10 years? I mean, it's humbling. I mean, I think it's great. I mean, we seem to have created this little, I'd say quite tight-knit little community of dreamers who are, you know, able to explore different things with me. I guess the one thing that I worry about is it's a formula that's quite difficult to push forward. Obviously, we do other things on the channel, including like the current Amori playthrough, which I don't know how much that appeals to Yumi Tooky viewers, and judging by the amount of people who interact with them, probably not a great deal. Maybe because they've already played it or seen it, but as long as the game keeps getting updated, I'm hoping that's something that I can continue to do because I do enjoy it. Sometimes I almost wish there was more controversial content in it that I could start getting really angry at back in the day, but it's not quite the same these days. There's still things that I think are not quite up to the high standards that I expect of the game, but are we going to hit 200 episodes? I sure hope so. Zach also asks, what is your history with Doom? When did you first discover it, first come to love it, and then discover the mods and such? Well, possibly showing my age a bit here, but I mean, I remember interacting with Doom when I was quite young. I can't remember how young, but I certainly was very young. And playing it on a PC, I think it was the original Doom, and listening to the bloody PC speaker music, which was horrendous, and then getting it on my computer. At the time, I kind of then proceeded naturally onto like Quake and Quake 2 and stuff as it released other games, but I think maybe in the 2000s was when I went back to look at like the Doom WODs and community stuff. Maybe a little bit earlier than that, because I remember having some exposure to source ports before there was even Z-Doom, because I was mucking around with different things and was a bit frustrated with Doom 95. But I think it was when I got Z-Doom when I really started getting interested in like the big Doom community and the different WODs and mega WODs that folk had made. Funnily enough, I don't really play a lot of Doom outside of streaming and stuff anymore, other than when I find an interesting WOD and I play it through, which is, you know, that's what happens when it's, you know, a game that's, what, God knows what, 25, 30 years old, God, something like that. it's not something that you just really sit and play anymore. I suppose it's a bit like Tooky, really. When there's something to have a look at, then there's a good reason to fire it up. And it's something that I hope has a grip on people for a long time. I mean, it doesn't seem to me like Doom 2016, for example, is going to have people making content for it in 20 years, if they even remember it. But it'd be fantastic if folk were still making classic Doom content 20 years from now. Xenon Quark asks, favourite Yumi Tooky fan game you reviewed on stream? Well, specifically on stream, that's a interesting restriction, but it's a funny question. I don't really tend to pick out favourites, and in truth, a lot of the fan games that we've played over the many years seem to just blur into just like one unending nightmare. But I think two that definitely spring to mind when we talk about things that I think are really, you know, above everything else, or at least are trying to push the boundary a bit more than everything else, would be Illusion, if you remember, with the cute voices, lots of weird sound effects, and just generally being a bit eccentric. I think it's still being updated, so I probably ought to go back and check that out at some point. And the other one is Somnium. Somnium mainly because I think the concept of it does a really good job at trying to advance what a Yumi Tooky fan game can play like. And it adds this sort of LSD dream emulator sort of element to it without just being LSD dream emulator. It kind of has its own thing. Stylistically, it was quite interesting. The work of Mrs. Sapiens is always quite interesting, but I think Somnium is a definite favourite of mine. But yeah, Illusion is one that for some reason it just sticks in my mind. Maybe it's the name, I don't know. Usually terrible at remembering fan game names, but Illusion, after I think I got reminded of it once, is one that I seem to keep remembering, so that would probably be my favourites. There's another question from Crystal Creation. What introduced you to Yumi Tooky and or the Yumi Tooky fan game scene? Gosh, I think I might have talked about this a little bit on the streams, but there was a flash file that was circulating around, probably on image boards, ages and ages ago, of Madatsuki in the hand stairwell with the music from the checkerboard tile path area playing, and something about that just, I was like, wow, this is weird. I love this. And I think, if I remember correctly, that's what kind of set me out on this quest to see what the hell this was. So it involved tracking down Yumi Tooky and giving it a playthrough. I don't remember really interacting with the community, like the scene, much at that time, but I think a little while after that I came across Desu-chan, which had, I think it had a board on it that was to do with Yumi Tooky, and then that, I might be wrong in the history of this, so don't lambast me in the comments if I'm mucking this up, but that then became Boa-chan, which we still kind of know today, certainly it's Discord. Of course, I never really interacted with these communities, but it did sort of expand my horizons a bit in terms of what other Yumi Tooky content was out there, and then Yumi Tooky fan games, which, you know, started to come around, including our beloved Tooky and things like Dot Flow and stuff like that. My memory is a bit patchy on exactly how some of the sequence of these things went, but that sounds like it's about right, probably. Just Your Average Random Watcher asks, you did say you were going to reveal the secret of how to say my name. Also, you've been playing Yumi Tooky fan games for such a long time. Are you getting tired of it? I'll answer the second part first. Am I getting tired of it? Not as broad as that. Tooky has its moments. It's difficult for me to really just play and enjoy Tooky these days, just because a lot of the content is kind of buried and requires effort and a bit of trial and error and probably a bit of research to try and figure out exactly what to do, which I try and avoid. I try and explore it naturally as much as I can, but it's difficult. Thankfully, we've got things like patch notes and stuff to help you these days, and of course the Yumi Tooky wiki. Fan games generally, no, I wouldn't say I'm getting tired of those. I think it's really exciting seeing what people are doing. I think it's great that we've got the Dream Diary Jam, because it's like this little pulse of content where people are making interesting things, and people who might not necessarily have made a fan game before give it a shot. In terms of how to say my name, I'm going to let the lovely Frocto answer that question for you.
Today we're playing Set Willy 2 for the ZX Spectrum, submitted by Fujkjuf. That's his name.
Pseudofossil asks, what did you do to my family? It's probably better you don't know. Bone Jackal asks, what are some of your favourite worlds in Yumi Tooky? If you could add a new effect to the game, what would it do? As for some things outside of Yumi Tooky, who are your favourite mainstream and non-mainstream bands? Well, in terms of favourite worlds, there's a few. Trying to pick some across the generations. I've always kind of loved Japantown. I always think it's quite peaceful, and I like the way it connects off into little things. Relatively easy to access. It's like an interesting little area, and it's been in the game for a long time, and you know, I think it stands the test of time quite well. Another one from more recently, which I always think about of Tooky nowadays, is the static labyrinth area with the glitchy, the sort of TV effect and everything sort of being a bit glitchy and buggy and all the weird tile effects and stuff. I've got no idea how much RPG Maker experience it takes to make that area, but I just love it. The whole atmosphere of it is just, it's almost intoxicating. I love it. And then another one which I remember quite fondly is kind of similar. It's kind of, well, I say it's kind of similar. It's kind of gloomy. I believe it's called Erratic Pillar Land. I just love the atmosphere in there. It feels really ominous, and yet it's not like in your face or like really bearing down on you. It's just quite unsettling. The music and the ambience of the area, I love it. I think it's a really cool area. If I could add a new effect to the game, that's a difficult question. I kind of wish the bat effect worked a bit more like how it used to, and that you could almost just teleport whenever and back whenever you wanted, which would make exploring some areas really, really helpful. I don't really know if I would add a specific new effect to the game. What I would probably want to see though is all of the effects acting a little bit more consistently, so that you could kind of understand what they're doing, and rather than it just seeming kind of random, really. Maybe some kind of projectile weapon would be quite cool. Something that lets you take care of chasers or something from a distance. That could be quite neat. Or even just freeze them. Maybe a freeze ray. That'd be cool. Give Tooky a freeze ray. Who are my favourite mainstream and non-mainstream bands? I gotta be honest, I don't really listen to a whole lot of bands, as you might be referring to there. I don't really listen to a lot of band-driven music, mainstream or not. I mean, there's some bands from like the 90s and stuff that I don't mind listening to now, but I don't really have favourites. In terms of music though, there's quite a few producers of music, like electronic music, that I quite enjoy. Tying back to my previous answer talking about getting into synthesizers, one particular guy, Surgeon, who's a kind of a techno ambient DJ producer guy who does a lot of this improvisational stuff. I quite like his music, although in fairness not necessarily his most recent music. There's some other producers in that scene that I quite like, but to be honest, I don't even really have a favourite. I just kind of float around and listen to what I like. Swingus asks, do you wish RPG Maker was more or less accessible? Like right now, anyone can pick it up, but that leads to Yumi Tooky fan games of varying quality. Well, I guess the potential issue there is that you don't need to use RPG Maker to make a Yumi Tooky fan game. In fact, I think I've demonstrated that, perhaps not particularly well, with my first entry to the Dream Diary Jam, which was Night Shift, which I made in my own engine. And of course, you don't even need to do that. I mean, there's other RPG Maker engines, and there's other game engines indeed that people have made Yumi Tooky-like experiences in. So I don't know if that would necessarily gate the content, or gate the quality of the content that people would try and submit. I don't think that there should be some blocker to like submitting games of varying quality. I mean, in any artistic medium, there's a good chance that the first few attempts that you'll make at something are going to be terrible. So So we can't really just say, well, until you get good, don't fucking, you can't even try. Doesn't sound very fair. I mean, it would be nice almost to screen out some of the real dreg, but I mean, in my recent memory anyway, we've not really come across seriously poor quality content in the Yumi Tooky fan game department. We've come across some real crap content, but I wouldn't say like offensively bad like in the early days of doing the bingo streams. So I don't know. I wouldn't, maybe more accessible, to be fair. I mean, you have to buy it, don't you? So it would almost be better if it was free, you know, some kind of open source thing. I know you've got things like Easy RPG, but that's different. I think, you know, if it's the medium that somebody wants to use to try and tell their story, then more accessible would be better, I would say. Fairy Slash asks, Hailstorm of 2020 questions. How did the pandemic affect you / your job? Did you get a vaccine, the 2-shot or 1-shot kind? Do you have a favourite obscure animal? I like kangaroo rats. Haha. Well, the pandemic affecting my job. I have essentially been working from my gamer chair for the last year and a half. This is only just starting to change a little bit, but still most of the time, working or not, to be fair, I've been here at home. Some people at my work did get either let go or have been on a furlough scheme for some time, where they've just been getting sort of 80% of their pay or whatever it was, and not actually doing any work. I think that's all stopped now because things are starting to return to some kind of normality. It didn't really affect me too much personally, although I would say, funnily enough, I've been more productive since I've been not having to go into an office. Some things have kind of fallen away though. I mean, some of you might remember I was trying to learn Japanese. I was mainly doing that on my commute. Since I'm not commuting anymore, I've not really been doing that. It was also a good way of building some exercise into my day, because I had a little routine where I would get a bit of exercise in the morning and on the trip home. I'm not doing that either, so I've had to try and find a different way to do that. Did I get a vaccine? Certainly did. I've only had the 1-shot at the moment, so I'm still due to get another shot, which I think is like a month away or something like that. It's still a way away. In terms of a favourite animal, I don't know how well this is going to answer your question. There's a thing I think about sometimes when I'm thinking of obscure creatures called a Cloudina, or a Cloudina, I'm not really sure how it's pronounced, which is a creature that would have lived inside a little tube from hundreds of millions of years ago, which nobody knows what it looks like beyond the tube that it would have lived in. So I think there's some proof of the tube existing, but there's no specific examples of what the thing that lived inside it would have looked like. So I find that fascinating. Dr. Odd asks, are there any games, especially indie RPG Maker ones, that you personally like a lot but haven't featured them on the channel because you thought they might not fit the audience? Well, that's an interesting one. Most of the RPG Maker games that I play, I do actually share with you guys, be it middens or whatever. I mean, I do share them with you guys, and that's really the only RPG Maker games that I play. I don't really play a lot of other, like, I suppose, proper RPG Maker games. If there is something that I come across in that space, I tend to either make a YouTube video about it or at least make an aside to it. So we're playing through Amori at the moment, and middens, as I said, and Endroll. Beyond that, I don't really think there's, not that I can think of off the top of my head anyway, there's any RPG Maker games that I've spent any serious time on, that I've thought, oh, but my channel wouldn't like that. Probably would inflict it on you guys anyway, even if I didn't think you were going to like it. And finally, Dr. Odd asks, when will you reveal your VTuber avatar? Soon. So that's it. Thank you very much for your questions, guys. Hopefully the answers that I gave were interesting and illuminating in some way. It's been quite good fun thinking about these things and putting together the answers. Thank you very much for your patronage, of course. We've been going a long journey, as has been highlighted in these questions. Maybe we'll do this again at some point in the future. Of course, as I think was highlighted on Discord, you're welcome to batter questions at me ad hoc, but I kind of like this format. I think it's quite interesting. Anyway, dreamers, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully I will see you on the next one.